So this to me is the more fascinating side of the ball in Super Bowl 59. It is the Kansas City Chiefs offense versus the Philadelphia Eagles defense. And boy, do I have a great load of statistics and graphics for you guys. Okay, it's Patrick Mahomes versus Vic Fangio. It's Andy Reid versus Fangio. It's Mahomes versus the best defense, in my opinion, in the NFL. Okay, let's look at the tail of the tape when it comes to the Eagles defense and the Chiefs offense. All right. So the Chiefs in yards per play were pretty pedestrian at 22nd in the NFL this season. They were 13th running the ball. They were 8th throwing the ball, and their points per drive, still a top 10 offense at 10th. For the Eagles, they were 1st in yards per play. We'll get to an interesting statistic specifically about yards per play here in a little bit, but 1st at 4.8 yards per play allowed this season. They were 2nd in rush EPA, they were 3rd in pass EPA, and they were 2nd in points per drive. Pretty much across the board, they were a dominant defense. They did not have a weakness. Pass game or run game, no real weakness. Their starters are pretty much intact outside of Nakobe Dean, who did get injured during their playoff run. The Chiefs are coming off their highest scoring game of the season, where they did put up 30-plus points. The Eagles did have the best defense in the league in success rate, in also 2nd in pass defense success rate. Now, the statistic that I was referring to when it comes to yards per play is that ever since week 5, when the Eagles made the switch to Cooper DeJean at the nickel back position, the Eagles have the best defense in yards per play in the next-gen era, period. 4.2 yards per play allowed is the lowest since, I believe, 2016, when the next-gen era began, okay, on or NFL, whatever they do with that. But that is the measure, okay? So Cooper DeJean became the starter in week 5-ish. They play the 2nd highest rate of nickel defense, meaning 4 down linemen, 2 linebackers, 3 cornerbacks, and 2 safeties. 5 defensive backs, okay? That's basically what nickel means, 5 defensive backs, okay? So nickel is the Eagles' thing, and the Eagles don't really change when it comes to their defensive, formula. They rush 4, they play too high, and they play nickel, all the time. They don't really change. It's kind of like how the Seahawks used to be. We're so good at this, you're going to have to find a way to beat us. We're going to play very sound. We're going to have a little bit of creativity in our coverages. We might throw a little bit of different flares at you in terms of rotations and sim pressures and things like that. But we're going to play nickel, we're going to rush 4, and we're going to play coverage. And that's what we're going to do the entire game, and you can't beat it, so it doesn't matter. Now, a key factor in whether or not the Chiefs will be able to beat it is the history between Vic Fangio and Patrick Mahomes. And you guys might have heard this before, but Patrick Mahomes is 8-0 against Vic Fangio-led teams. That being said, we're going to dive deeper into this because Vic Fangio never had a quarterback and has never really had an offense to support him against the Chiefs. So just the win-loss record itself is not very handy in this discussion because Denver and Miami offenses scored 6 points, 3 points, 16 points, 16 points, 9 points, 14 points, 7 points, and only 24 was the highest. So only one game of 20-plus points, and every other game was 16 or less. So, yeah, Fangio has lost 8 times, but a lot of that is because he hasn't had a quarterback or he hasn't had an offense. This has included Miami last year and Denver in previous seasons when he was the head coach, okay? So let's dive a little bit deeper into these statistics of Fangio and Patrick Mahomes. Now, these are the last 4 games, okay? The last 4 games. Fangio has done a really good job against Mahomes. This includes 2 games last year in Miami, one of the games in the playoffs where Fangio was missing a lot of his personnel, and then the games in Denver, okay? So 225 yards per game, under a 60% completion, 85 for 144, not 85 for 44. That's a mistake on the graphic. 59%. Touchdown to interception ratio was 5 touchdowns to only 1 pick. Still pretty solid. Overall, it's 10-2. And points, 76 in those matchups, offensively speaking. Okay, actually, there was 3 defensive touchdowns scored by Patrick Mahomes' teams in these 4 games, which is pretty insane. But 76 points, 19 points per game for the offense. Under 20 points, under a 60% completion, and only 225 yards per game in the last 4 meetings between Fangio and Mahomes on 2 different teams, which I do think is a little bit of a factor. Okay, now diving a little bit deeper into that, I've just noticed a trend, okay? So the Chiefs overall in those 8 games scored 21.6 offensive points per game. So more than 19, 21.6, still not great. His career average is 28, okay? So 21.6. The last 5 games, he has under a 60% completion. A lot of incompletions is something that I've noticed against Fangio. Mahomes tends to throw more incompletions. He's been held under 300 yards in all of the last 4 games against Fangio defenses. He averages only 1.25 touchdowns per game against Fangio and only a 6.5 yards per attempt in the last 4 games. Okay. Overall, 10-2 touchdown interception, 8-0 record, which is impressive. But when you dive deeper, it's not exactly the best offensive production that we've seen from Patrick Mahomes, especially when you compare it to other defenses that he's played. That's for sure. Okay. Now, one of the interesting things about last year's meeting between Fangio and Mahomes is that Mahomes faced 0 blitz from Fangio 18 times in the playoff game. 18 times. It forced 4 throwaways, and it actually worked a pretty good amount in that game. But that was due to Miami's personnel. They were missing like 3 edge rushers in the game, multiple defensive linemen. They had a lot of injuries. So Fangio was forced to blitz a lot in that game and not do what he typically does, which is blitz at only a 16% rate in these playoffs and 19% in the regular season. Fangio tends to rush 4. But it would be interesting to see if he occasionally in this game does blitz on 3rd down because of the fact that, you know, he did that a lot in the playoffs last year, and it actually had a little bit of success because what he basically said last year was, we've got Jalen Ramsey, we've got a pretty good secondary, you know, Devon Holland, like we've got some guys in the back end that can cover. Let's play to our strength of our defense. Let's try to cover the Chiefs, and let's just blitz the daylights out of them and try to get some stops and some big plays that way in the cold. And it worked a little bit. It did backfire a little bit, but the occasional blitz in this game could be handy because the Eagles do have very good corners and a very good secondary, and they're able to play man coverage. So if they do 0 blitz, I could see it happening a few times. Another thing that's really interesting against the Chiefs is the Chiefs like to motion a lot. They're the 6th highest rate of motion in the NFL. The Eagles are the best defense in the league against motion in yards per play and QBR. Their communication is second to none in the NFL in their secondary, which is why I think they're so good. Okay. So I don't expect the Eagles to kind of stray from what they do too often, but I think there could be some curveballs of some sim pressures, some 0 blitzes, some occasional man coverage reps. And I do often think that they'll have 4-man rush in 2 deep. That's probably how they're going to play a lot of the time. But I do think that they're going to mix some things up, especially with 2 weeks to prepare, with the amount of knowledge, the amount of games, the amount of tape that Fangio has of Mahomes playing against his defense. He's going to be able to pick some things that he likes and he doesn't like, especially with the most talented defense he's ever had. So it's going to be up to the Chiefs to counteract that and to be able to find the weaknesses of the Eagles. Now, one thing that I do expect is that Mahomes will throw the ball a lot in this game because the last 3 times he's played Fangio, he has thrown the ball 40 plus times in every single game. So I expect the Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, they're going to throw the ball a lot, I would expect. Although I think they could have maybe a little bit more success running the ball than people think, but we'll get to that a little bit later. He also tends to throw the ball a lot in the Super Bowl, 40 times, the last 3 times they played in the Super Bowl. Oh, wait, not the last 3 times, but 3 times overall. So they've played in how many Super Bowls? They've played in 4, okay? So 75% of the time, he has thrown 40 times in a game. He threw 40 times against the Niners the first time. He threw 40 times in the loss to the Bucs. He threw 40 times in the win against the Niners. Now, one of them was overtime. One of them was a blowout where they lost. One of them was a comeback. So you can understand why they threw 40 times. They didn't throw 40 times against the Eagles last time, but that was a lot because the Eagles defense, if you look back at the 22 Eagles, they were clearly worse against the run than the pass. If you look at them statistically, they were like 22nd against the run and they were first against the pass. So there was like a clear deficiency in their defense that the Chiefs tried to exploit, and they did. Okay. One of the key things that's also huge for Fangio and his defense is making Patrick Mahomes hold the ball. Okay. This is their best chance to win, as it is for any team in the NFL. The Chiefs are 19-15 in games where Mahomes holds the ball on average of 3 seconds per play. In the game in which they lost this year, week 11 against Buffalo, Mahomes held the ball 3.35 seconds on average. That was the highest average of the season and the only loss of the season. So basically, the key to the game is, can the Eagles tighten up in coverage, make Mahomes not go to his first read as often as possible, look to his second or his third, make him hold the ball so that the pressure gets home and forces him to throw it away, forces him to take a sack, forces him to make a mistake, okay? Because that's how the Bills beat them. That's how teams have beat them in the past. Force Mahomes to ad-lib, as crazy as that sounds, okay? That's actually the facts of the matter. And I think that is because Andy Reid, you don't want Andy Reid to beat you. You want these receivers to beat you. You want Mahomes to have to make plays that aren't already open, okay? You don't want the offensive scheme to beat you. That being said, Mahomes has won 90% of his games when he throws the ball under 3 seconds. He has also not held the ball longer than 2.65 seconds in the last 4 games at all, okay? So getting the ball out quick has been the key to the Chiefs' success on offense lately. The Eagles, though, allow quarterbacks to get the ball out at a pretty fast rate of 2.7. That's the 3rd fastest in the NFL, and I think that's because they don't blitz a lot. So when you blitz more, I think that means the ball comes out faster, and I think if you what am I trying to say? So I think it's because like the coverage. So because it's a 2-deep defense and a 4-man rush, I think oftentimes quarterbacks can complete passes, but they don't go for a lot of yards. As we know, the Eagles have the best defense in yards per play defensively, and also success rate in the pass game. So a lot of the plays are not successful, but they still get the ball out fast. Okay, so it's a matter of making those plays successful for Mahomes. In terms of the pass rush, okay, there's a lot of different matchups for the pass rush. The interior rush of the Eagles is the best in the NFL. They are first in PFF grade, they are second in pressure percentage, and they are first in win rate. Okay, Jalen Carter and Milton Williams are keys to this game. Jalen Carter leads the playoffs with 20 pressures. That's 9 more than second place. Milton Williams is the second graded pass rushing defensive tackle in the NFL this year. He is also 18th overall for PFF. So second best pass rushing grade, only behind Chris Jones. He also has 10 pressures in the playoffs, which is tied for the second most, tied with Chris Jones. Milton Williams will be a key, an X factor against not Frank Caliendo, but Mike Caliendo. Caliendo allowed a sack and 10 pressures against Buffalo. Oliver had 2 hits, and Phillips had a sack as well for the Bills. Those players can be disruptive, and if you have interior pressure, it allows you to contain the pocket and not allow Mahomes to escape and run, if you can get consistent interior pressure. So when you're watching the game, try to see which direction Creed Humphrey is turning his head. Is he often doubling Jalen Carter? Or are the Eagles finding ways to get Carter one-on-one at times? I don't think that will happen very often because I think the Chiefs will try to take him out of the game. But will Milton Williams work one-on-one against Caliendo and, have Carter eat up the 2 best interior linemen, which would be Smith and would be Creed Humphrey? Or do the Chiefs take their chances with having Jalen Carter one-on-one with Caliendo, or one-on-one with Trey Smith at times? What if they double Milton Williams with Caliendo and Creed Humphrey to the left, let's say, and they leave Carter one-on-one with Trey Smith because Trey Smith's going to get paid. So it'll be interesting to see how that works out. But both players can get to the quarterback, both are disruptive, and both can sack the quarterback. Nolan Smith has also been incredible in the playoffs. 15 pressures and 4 sacks in the playoffs. He has played 150 of his 178 snaps on the left side of the line, which is where Mahomes often runs. Nolan Smith, if you want to check his 40 time, I want to say he ran a 4.440 out of the draft from Georgia. He was extremely fast. So not only can he rush the quarterback and get pressure, but he can also track you down and get you in space. So it wouldn't be surprising if he tracked down Mahomes a couple of times because of how fast he is. It'll be interesting to see how Fangio utilizes him in terms of maybe spying occasionally, or even, looping on blitzes, or if they ask him to be overly aggressive rushing the quarterback, because if he does get over aggressive and runs past Mahomes, that might be where the lanes open up for Mahomes to get pressure. I don't see Sweat being a huge factor here because he'll majority of the time be lined up against Tooney. But if he could beat Tooney, who has moved to tackle, that would obviously help. But Joe Tooney has moved to tackle, and the interesting thing is about the Chiefs' offensive line is they've moved from the best interior blocking line in the league with Joe Tooney, like number 1 in grade and number 1 just objectively, to the 19th best interior pass blocking unit. And we just talked about Carter and Williams' ability to get pressure. So Fangio, I don't expect too many spies. I expect a few blitzes. I expect a lot of 4-man rush. And I expect maybe some stunts and things to try to get one-on-ones with advantageous matchups. But I do expect the Eagles, if Mahomes holds the ball, to get pressure. But it's all up to him holding the ball or not. And that comes down to the decision-making for the Chiefs, to their play calling, what they're looking to do in the passing game, their running game, their down and distance, and a lot of different things. All right? So then we get to, okay, what are the Chiefs trying to do with the quick game? Because that's kind of their entire offense. And guys, if you haven't already, Gronk spike the like button. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more NFL content just like this. Continuing to break down Chiefs offense, Eagles defense. The quick game. Patrick Mahomes has targeted receivers behind the line of scrimmage at a career high 27% this season. Okay? Resulting in 851 passing yards, which was the second most in the NFL, only behind Baker Mayfield, and a league-high 45 first downs. That is a stat from Next Gen, okay? He has accounted for 5 of the top 6 seasons since 2016 in passing yards behind the line of scrimmage. And when you go deeper than that, the Chiefs have only thrown 7 completions past 10 yards in the playoffs. Okay? 7. That's it. Mahomes has had 26% of his passes be completed beyond 20 yards, which is the worst in the NFL. So from a statistical standpoint, the Chiefs are the best quick game offense in the league, the best screen offense in the league, the best RPO offense in the league, but the worst vertical offense in the league. Okay? When we compare that to the Eagles defense, the Eagles defense has allowed the fewest yards per attempt and the lowest success rate on passes thrown behind the line of scrimmage. In part because of Cooper DeJean, in part because of, I think, Zach Bond, I think because of the speed of guys like Nolan Smith, and I think because of how well they communicate and seemingly they tackle. But it's a strength for strength. Like, the Eagles have allowed the lowest yak over expected from any secondary in the league, while Kansas City is more reliant on yak than any offense in the league. They're more reliant, 61.5 receiving yards after the catch. Okay? This is going to be interesting because how do the Chiefs go about this? I think that you're going to see a variety. I think you're going to see run, balance. I think you're going to see play action quite a bit in order to get some shots down the field and to try to take some strategic shots down the field off of play action. I think you're going to see moving the pocket quite a bit from Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes to try to kind of get this D-line a little bit off. I think you're going to see quite a bit of drop back and option routes over the middle of the field by guys like Juju, Kelce, Noah Gray, DeAndre Hopkins potentially. And I think that is going to be their quick game. I don't know how much they're going to flat out screen because of how successful the Eagles are against it, but I would expect some reverses. I'd expect the typical Chiefs sort of stuff, but I don't know how much that's going to be successful, just driven by the statistics here. I do expect Juju to have a good game. I actually think he's low-key like a really kind of X-Factor type player. I would expect Marquise Brown to not have a great game just based on his overall archetype. I'd expect maybe Diop to make a few plays, but the tight ends are going to be critical because the personnel package of the Eagles playing a lot of 5 defensive backs, being lighter against the run, having a lot of light boxes, is probably going to allow the Chiefs to play a lot of 2 tight end formations to get some size on the field, potentially to be able to run the ball, and to use Noah Gray and Travis Kelce as short to intermediate options in the passing game. Now, the Eagles have allowed the lowest yards per catch to tight ends. Again, another statistic they lead the NFL in. Who's surprised? Not me. I mean, just an incredible defense. They allow nothing, essentially. But you've got Kelce and Gray. And the one player I think they might be able to pick on is Burks, who is a backup. Nakobe Dean has been the starter. Burks filled in as the backup. That being said, I looked deeper into Burks to see if he's been playing well or poorly, and he actually has the most pass play stops in the playoffs among all linebackers. And pass play stops is a statistic from PFF, which indicates a negative play for the offense. So actually, he's played really well, and he has a 74 coverage grade. But that being said, he was terrible in the Super Bowl last year, and the Chiefs played him last year in the Super Bowl for the 49ers, and he was not good. And he had to replace Dre Greenlaw. Also, we've seen Zach Ertz go off against his defense. 16 targets, 11 catches, 104 yards. The ageless wonder. Can Kelce do something similar? Tyler Higbee also had a touchdown, 54 yards and 7 catches on 10 targets. So perhaps their tight end is a possibility here if you can find ways to scheme it up and find the one-on-one matchups with their linebackers or their safeties. That could be an avenue for the Chiefs. I'd expect Noah Gray to be quite involved with like 3 or 4 catches. I'd expect Kelce to get, 5 to 7 catches, something like that. Cooper DeJean could also be pretty important in this area. Do the Eagles look to put him in certain situations one-on-one with Kelce? Because I think if they do, that's their best matchup. I think he can hold Kelce, but especially at this age. But that would mean that they maybe have to put another corner on the field. That might mean that they throw Chauncey Gardner-Johnson or CJ or whatever his name is now. Maybe they throw him in the nickel occasionally and have him play against a receiver. That is going to, if they put DeJean a lot on the tight end, that's going to change the matchups and the math. So I'm not sure how much they'll be able to do that, but we'll see. Maybe when they do blitz or they do play a little bit of man, that could be the matchup to watch. Now, the Chiefs' run game versus the Eagles' run defense is where we're going to finish on this side of the football. The Eagles have only allowed 2 players from the quarterback position to run for over 30.5 rushing yards this year. I bring up 30.5 because that's the prop that a lot of people are going to bet over for Patrick Mahomes. But only Lamar Jackson and Jaden Daniels have rushed for over 30.5 rushing yards at the quarterback position. Lamar Jackson and Jaden Daniels, the 2 best runners at the quarterback position in the NFL. Okay, so I wouldn't expect too much success from Mahomes. Maybe an occasional scramble, but I don't really think that he's going to go off here necessarily. Probably not as productive as he was in that first Super Bowl matchup. Now, when it comes to the run in particular, I think there could be some success for the Chiefs because they don't get stuffed a lot. They're the second lowest rate of being stuffed at the line of scrimmage against light boxes. The Eagles do run light boxes, 6 or fewer defenders at 68.5%, nearly 70%. That's 10% higher than any team in the NFL. So the Eagles are daring you to run the ball against their stud defensive line. They're asking you and pleading to you, please run the ball. The Chiefs' ability to do that or not is going to make or break this game. And is going, honestly, unless, they have to find some success running the ball. Because if not, Mahomes is going to have to throw the ball 50 times, and he's going to have to throw the ball really accurately, really successfully, probably a ton short and underneath, and have to be very, very, very good, very, very consistently. And these receivers are going to have to be on their game. Because The run game, like, you're going to have to run it. Like, the Chiefs' ability to win Super Bowl 57, they were able to run the ball. They had 13 carries for 89 yards against light boxes in that game. And that was Gannon's defense that's based around Fangio's defense, but still, they were able to run the ball. Remember, Mahomes did not have 200 yards in Super Bowl 57. Guys, he didn't even have 200 yards. They ran the ball. They had 15 carries for 76 yards and 5.1 yards per carry for Pacheco. McKinnon had 8.5 yards per carry on 4 rushes, and Mahomes also had 44 yards. But the Chiefs' run game has only 3.5 yards per carry since Joe Thuney moved to left tackle. So they've been running the ball worse. I thought they ran the ball well against Buffalo, but Buffalo is much worse against the run than the Eagles. So can the Chiefs from 2 tight end formations get a little bit of power? Can they get under center a little bit and run the ball? Because that's something we saw with the Rams. They were able to run the ball that way kind of effectively. The Commanders weren't really able to run the ball against the Eagles all that well. But can they find just enough success to avoid the second and the third and longs, just as we spoke about with the Eagles offense? I think the Chiefs' run game is a huge X factor, not only to move the ball, but also to kill the clock and take the Eagles out of their ball possession game, which is what they want to be and what they want to do. Okay, so those are both sides of football, guys. That is Chiefs offense, Eagles defense. I think the Eagles defense has the advantage in a majority of these areas. I think in terms of drop back pass, I think they have the advantage. I think in terms of run, that is where I would say it's a little even. The Eagles are favored in terms of statistically. I do think, though, the Chiefs, in order to move the ball and score a lot of points, the Chiefs are going to have to, Mahomes is going to have to throw 40 times, and Mahomes is going to have to be very precise. Think Tom Brady versus the Legion of Boom, Super Bowl 49. A lot of razor cuts, a lot of underneath passes, and that's going to how they're going to be able to matriculate. And this is going to have to be on the back of a great game plan and a great play calling day for Andy Reid. And they're also, to avoid the pass rush, going to have to get the ball out fast. If the Chiefs get the ball out fast, they have more success. They win more often, 90%. If the Eagles make them hold it, you're going to know early in the game, that's where the Eagles can win this game. If they make Mahomes hold the ball and they're able to stop the run out of light boxes.